What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So I have been playing Most Wanted 2012 a bit recently, and something actually hit me with it. What made Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012 one of the worst Need for Speed games ever? On top of that, what also made it one of the most hated Need for Speed games ever? These are actually two questions I kept asking myself while playing it, and I have to admit something right now, guys. When I was playing this game 11 years ago, because it's legit that old, which is kind of odd, I actually was like, you know what, maybe this game is not exactly what I remembered it being. Like, yeah, the game is obviously fun, but now playing it, I am seeing some of the flaws now that I most likely didn't see before. And I would say a few things can probably play an effect here. Like, yes, we were obviously younger playing games back then. Most Wanted 2012 is obviously pretty old. And going back to something like that, like, you do enjoy it, but you're also going to be like, okay, I see this flaw, I see that one, I see this problem. Like, I kind of can't overlook that stuff now. The funny thing is, I was actually looking at different forums and stuff, and I was seeing what people thought about it. And I was actually noticing a recent forum a few years ago where someone played Most Wanted, and I was going through some of it like, okay, I agree with this, that's actually kind of true. And then I was also like, well, that's probably not going to be the truest thing out there. I mean, everybody is going to have like their own opinion on stuff, so I respect it. And those two questions kept popping into my head, like, why was Most Wanted so hated and what made it one of the worst Need for Speed games? I think I'm around 15 or like 16 hours on it right now at the moment, which again, I haven't played this game in around 11 years, so it's definitely going to be a pretty interesting experience for me. I mean, I basically haven't raced on this game in a long time, and I can actually see some of the positives about the game, and also, I can definitely see some of the more negative things on why the game wasn't that great. So a few things I have noticed, and I have actually seen many things about forums on this, but the biggest reason why people did not like Most Wanted was because it was more of a Burnout type of game, and the funny thing is, after playing it, I can see that. I mean, a few small examples of that. For one, I did notice like there's not going to be an odometer on the vehicles. There's just going to be like a nitrous bar, then obviously the speed you're going. And then we're also going to have small things like the way you take down players, or at least the AI for that matter, because I haven't played online yet. Not sure if I'm actually going to. But taking down other AI racers really did remind me of something like Burnout Revenge back in the day on PlayStation 2. Crazily enough, I still have the disc to that game, but I don't have a PS2 to play it on, which is kind of unfortunate. Love Burnout Revenge, though. I didn't really get to play Burnout Paradise, but I did see that on the forums as well. Apparently, people were saying this game was very similar to Burnout Paradise. That I could actually probably see after watching some gameplay on it. And this was also bringing me into the next thing, though. It was making me think about a different Need for Speed game that obviously came out before Most Wanted 2012, and that was going to be Hot Pursuit 2010. The crazy part, guys, is you can definitely see big differences with each game. I mean, for one, I actually kind of like the map in Hot Pursuit more. I do understand Fairhaven's map is dope. I actually love it. Probably going to be around top 3. I like the way the map flows and stuff like that. I would actually say in some ways I do like Heat's map a bit better than Fairhaven, but I would also say I like Heat in general a lot more, which I will probably make a video touching on that. The thing about this though is when playing Hot Pursuit, like, yeah, you obviously have a lot of different cars in that game. I would actually say most of the cars, for example, the Zesto Elemento, we also have the Gumpert Apollo. Neither one of those cars are in Most Wanted 2012, which obviously they were in Hot Pursuit. I'm sure it's probably going to be like a whole licensing thing on why that is, but it's kind of crazy to me because you can see big differences with each game. I mean, for one, you're obviously going to have the cars in Hot Pursuit feeling a bit more heavy, or I guess you could say they feel more car orientated, if that makes sense. In Most Wanted, you kind of feel like the cars aren't as heavy, and certain vehicles probably don't have weight to them, and you're most likely going to be flying basically all over the place while trying to take down other racers and, of course, cops at the same time of it. And that was also bringing me to the fact that Most Wanted 2012 was heavily reliant on the lovely takedown mechanic, which I would say is going to be good in some ways, but also honestly terrible. I mean, depending on which vehicle you're driving, for example, the Bach Mono or the Ariel Atom, if you barely get touched in one of those cars, you are flying into a guardrail, or most likely flying back into a different Need for Speed game because it's legit that terrible. I was noticing, for example, driving the Bach Mono in a few different events, if my car barely got touched in a few places, guys, I'd have to restart it, or I would be so far behind I would obviously catch back up. I get in front of the NPCs, and then boom, they'd hit me, and it was pretty much over. Now I do understand though that yes, the Bachmano and the Ariel Atom are obviously going to be light vehicles like the Cataran for example, and we all do know those cars are obviously going to get knocked off the road insanely quick by something like a Dodge Charger. Like, I get it, but I also understand why the entire takedown mechanic isn't the funnest experience. Now, a few other things I did want to talk about. The next one is going to be the overall progression in Most Wanted 2012. Funny thing is, I have to mention this again, guys, I never took notice of it back in the day. Now, this can probably come down to a few reasons, like I basically beat the single player, leveled up, and then jumped and only played on multiplayer. The thing about single player though is you basically have all the cars scattered around the map, right? They're all going to be the jack spots. You pick a vehicle, you drive it, you do the events, you level it up, you get something like an aero kit. You also get short, long gears, power shot nitrous, and burn nitrous. You level that vehicle up, you make it a bit faster, that way you can use it against the most wanted drivers. And all of course when you're doing that you're also gaining these speed points to actually race against the most wanted drivers. The thing about this though is I would say it is fun to a certain extent until you start noticing many of the vehicles having the exact same events, and then once you actually beat that race you can't do the race again and get a lot of speed points from it unless you actually beat your time on it. So once you actually do all the events, you actually unlock the vehicle parts and all that, you're basically not going to have anything to do on single player whatsoever. So what does that mean? You have to then go into multiplayer, which everyone's like, okay, so the overall single player progression is kind of gone. Yeah, you like level the vehicles up, you get certain things on them. Once you actually have them all, yeah, you can go back into the events, even do the most wanted drivers again in a different car if you want to. Unfortunately though, you're barely going to get any speed points from them. So one of the big takeaways for me though is when I was playing the single player on Most Wanted, I was like going through the events, going through most of the most wanted like drivers and stuff like that, going, okay, I got this car, let me level that one up. One of my favorites personally is easily going to be the Lexus LFA. I also love the Hennessy Venom, that thing is sweet. But again though, once you actually get the cars, you're like, alright, let me go do some races in them. You're most likely going to do some of these same races for the other vehicles that you most likely did. And then once you actually get those cars maxed out, you're like, okay, so what do I do now? The big thing is it basically pushes you into multiplayer. Now, one thing I do say though, the most wanted events were kind of dope. You basically like 1v1 that car, you beat it, and then you obviously have to take it down, and you get that car unlocked. Like, it's a cool design, but they easily could have did like 15 most wanted cars, had like a small story behind them. That way it actually would have made a lot more sense when going after the cars, instead of it basically throwing you into the game going, okay bro, go find a car randomly on the street and race some of the best drivers in the entire city. You're like, okay, let me go find a dope car, let me level it up a bit, and then boom, after that I'll go race all of the most wanted drivers, and then what? You're going to be the most wanted, which you're going to be number one on the list, with around 1 million plus speed points, which I also have to admit the entire speed point system is pretty cool, like with the milestones and stuff. But again though, you actually don't get anything past 1 million, besides like an actual like online level I believe, which I don't know what the max is. But despite all of that though, there's one thing I have to admit. Despite many of the flaws Most Wanted obviously had, I still really enjoyed it. I do know players didn't like the map and how it kind of like mirrored something like Burnout, with how like the billboards were, like certain designs of it. They also said like the map is way too small. I actually liked the way the map was designed, and it was really fun going really fast in the map. Like jumping into a hypercar doing 250 miles an hour felt so dang dope. And the other thing I actually really liked about Most Wanted 2012 was probably going to be the wrecking havoc part around the entire map. For example, jumping into your favorite car, going after the most wanted drivers again, destroying them, having fun with it, and then basically going around messing around with the police and stuff was just fun, man. Like having a maxed out heat level of 6 with like the rhinos coming in, and then you also have the lovely Corvette cops that seem to keep up with a Bugatti going 250 miles an hour. Whatever motor they have in those cars, bro, I need to swap that. That is absolutely insane. But again, though, it adds on to like the intensity of it, and that's probably going to be a big reason why I love Need for Speed Heat, because it's actually probably one of the best modern games when it comes to actually going against police and stuff like that, which funnily enough, I feel like that's why most players are going back to Heat, because of the intensity of the actual police chasing and racing in it. That's kind of the point of a Need for Speed game, I would probably guess. But overall though, guys, I am seriously interested in your thoughts on Most Wanted 2012. What do you actually think, and what is the biggest reason why this was one of the most hated Need for Speed games right behind Undercover? Which, by the way, that game was definitely something. But overall, though, there is one more thing I did want to add on to this. Despite some of the issues and many of the flaws Most Wanted obviously face with it being basically a Burnout type of game, I still really enjoyed it, man. Like, I did actually like racing on it. I did like using different cars, messing around with police, and also the multiplayer was so dang good in this game. It really probably was the best part of it. And even to that, a lot of players wanted other Need for Speed games to have a similar design, which I do know 2015 tried to have something like that, but again, Most Wanted just did it better. Now, would you guys actually like to see something like the multiplayer design of Most Wanted 2012 in a future Need for Speed game if it was done right? That I actually wanted to mention as well. I almost forgot about it. That was going to be a key thing about Most Wanted people didn't like. The customization in this game, guys, was basically non-existent. Don't get me wrong, I do understand the game was obviously not focused on like body kits or, engine swapping different ribs and stuff like that. Like, it wasn't that type of game. But all you can actually add to your vehicle was going to be long gears, short gears. You can obviously add like track tires and off-road tires to it. And then to change the color, you actually had to go through a gas station. And then boom, you basically cruise around, you crash it. You have to go through the gas station back and forth to get the color you actually liked, which was actually kind of funny when I was trying to do that. But I feel like a lot of players did not like the overall like progression of actually leveling up a vehicle, going after certain parts to make it quicker, and then boom, that was basically it. I really would like to know your thoughts on this in the comments below, guys. For you, what was the biggest reason you did not like Most Wanted 2012?